Hello. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. So yes, my name is Jamie. I'm one of the founders of Sorted Food. It's a truly social business with a global community of more than 2.5 million people sat at the very heart of it. Now we have some lovely big numbers that I can show you, but this is the one that means the most to us. 400,000 people are spending on average 7.5 minutes every day watching, engaging, and talking to us around our content. In fact, in the last month alone, over 168 years of our content has been watched. And I don't tell you this to show off, although it's a very nice big number, but more just to give you a bit of an insight into the scale of the conversation that is happening online around food, around the world, every single day. And more than ever, those conversations are shaping the food that we're buying, the places that we're going to eat, the people that we're eating with. It's shaping what we're eating. And is that for good or is it for worse? So this morning, I want to chat to you a little bit about our journey as Sorted Food, where we've come from, how we've used social media as part of our journey, and where we see things around food trends going in the future. So if you can believe it by looking at this tired, haggard, slightly bloated face, I'm actually only 32 years old. And that puts me right slap bang in the center of the marketing world's favorite lazy segment, the millennial, which now seems to cover anyone aged between 20 and 40 years old. In reality, it means that me and my friends grew up in a world that shunned the traditional us and them or brand and consumer role, instead opting to build natural, authentic relationships using online platforms that were growing up at the same time as we were. And that's exactly how Sorted started. So, here is a group of me and my old school friends from 2008. We've actually known each other now for 20 years, which is a really scary long time. We left the comfort of home and ventured off to university in 2005, and we very quickly realized that there was something that we hadn't learned whilst we were at home. We hadn't learned how to cook. And so we were at university, up and down the country, studying different subjects, all eating complete and utter rubbish. Our diets were terrible. Now, fortunately for us, Ben, who's over there in the rugby shirt, which is ironic, he's never played rugby in his life, he was training to be a chef at university. So he had a few tips, tricks, simple recipes that he could share with us. And so very quickly began a conversation between us about how we could improve our cooking skills, how we could improve our diets, and learn more about the thing that we absolutely loved, food. Now, as I mentioned, we were studying across the country. So our conversation started to turn to the online platforms where we were spending more and more of our time. We started to talk to each other on places like Facebook, on Twitter. And at one point, it felt like a really good idea to film ourselves making some of those recipes and upload them to YouTube to share with more of our friends and see if we could find some more people to join in this conversation with us who were of the same age and mentality of us. Now, before we go any further and you think, God, these guys were geniuses 10 years ago, let me show you the first video that we uploaded and put that straight to bed. And I am going to apologize in advance as to how terrible this is.
Go shorty, it's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. We gon' sip a Bacardi like it's your birthday. And you know we don't give up, cause it's your birthday. You'll find me in the club, bottle full of bug. My mind got what you need if you need to fill a buzz.
Yeah, it gets worse. As I said, I'm very sorry that I had to show you that, but I feel like it puts everything else into context. But it was that online conversation that started to grow. It started to reach more friends that were up and down the country, studying at different universities. It started to get to friends of friends, people that we didn't know. And then we noticed that we were starting to get comments from people that were living in other countries and in places around the world. And suddenly, we'd realized that people were joining in because, unlike what they were able to access through traditional routes like TV, there were no experts and novices. There was no us and them. It was just a conversation between friends where everyone had something in common. They could join in a completely free and open way without fear of being ridiculed for not knowing something. And so we left university, we went and got real jobs, and this carried on in the background. And then a few of us decided to see, well, what could we do with this conversation? Where could we take this? So we quit our real jobs and decided to make this our full-time thing. And that conversation has now grown to become one of the largest and most engaged food conversations around food online in the world. And there's not just 4 of us doing it anymore. We have a team of 14 of us that operate out of a studio in East London, all digital natives, and we talk to a global community of people who share that same passion around food. And 9 times out of 10, this conversation doesn't start with us. It starts with the global community who are seeing things where they are and want to learn more about it. So everything that we do is community-led, and it's centered around exploring and uncovering great food together. Then we present that back to the internet in a straightforward, down-to-earth manner with emotive storytelling, and we ask people to join in, ask their questions, give us their thoughts and their opinions. Now, as you can imagine, we've seen a lot of changes over the last 10 years of running Sorted. It's food trends, it's social media usage and behaviours, and along with all the reasons that I've already mentioned, a lot of it can be traced back to this, the mobile phone. Now, I'm sure like most of you in this room, I'm never usually more than a couple of feet away from my mobile phone. In fact, it's generally in one of 2 places. It's either in my pocket or it's in my hand. And through it, I can access the breadth of the world's combined knowledge. But, like I'm sure most of you in this room, it's generally used for messaging, it's for taking photos, and it's for scrolling through hours of meaningless Twitter, Instagram, YouTube feeds. It's fair to say over the last 10 years, we've become completely addicted to our phones. And one of the main reasons for that is because we've become addicted to social media. Social media not only allows us to talk on a peer-to-peer basis with each other, but it also allows us to portray the best versions of ourselves to the world, to our friends and our family, to people that we'll never meet. No one puts up terrible pictures of themselves on Instagram. They filter them, they hide the blemishes. They want to portray their perfect life. Look at that guy, perfect. And this actually satisfies our basic animal instincts around attention, much like a peacock flashing their feathers. Ultimately, social media allows us to be our most egotistical selves and opens up the bragging rights that that can offer. And food as a subject matter fits perfectly into that. Food is universal. We all eat it at least 3 times a day. We all have our own opinions, our knowledge, everything that we want to share around food. It's sensual, it's intimate, it's one of the only things that we actually put into our bodies. And it's also the perfect way to show off what you're eating, where you're eating it, who you're eating it with. It all comes back to food. And in fact, people now use food to define their personalities. Charles mentioned it earlier on. Being a foodie is now incredibly commonplace. But there are niches that exist under the label of foodie. This is one of my favorites, the gastrosexual. A phrase coined to describe somebody whose drive for the latest or best food shapes their social life and who they are. Heading only to new restaurant openings or to street food markets with friends or to meet new friends. The grab-and-go or stand-and-eat street food culture has spiked massively, as Dominic mentioned, a reason so many of our community have been asking for more and more. Now, earlier this year, the Michelin star street food, Hawker Stand, came over from Singapore and set up as a pop-up near King's Cross. And the queues were absolutely unbelievable. And our community wanted us to go and check it out and find out what all the fuss was about. It was full of people who were desperate to not only try the food, but to say that they tried the food. To get the picture of themselves standing in the queue, waiting to get it. To get a picture of them with the dish, with the chef. It was about the experience as much as it was about the food itself. You also have the gourmand, probably something I can relate to, someone who proudly declares that they eat and drink too much. There's the locavore, people who only eat local produce to help the environment or help the economy. And you have the sober curious, I think was the term. And this was somebody who doesn't drink alcohol for whatever reason, but is bored of just drinking lime and soda or Diet Coke and wants to explore new flavor combinations that means that they can express themselves through drink. I digress, but the point is that social media and food are made for each other, and therefore it's become the catalyst for the creation and the propagation of food trends, as well as food and diet myths. Not to mention those, they're kind of the fake news. But where do you go to sift through the noise? It's your friends, it's your families, it's the online networks of the people that you trust. Maybe it's the 4 idiots from a YouTube channel that you've been following for the last 7 or 8 years. You trust what they have to say. But the platforms themselves are also shaping food trends. Take the rise of Instagram and Pinterest. With platforms centered around imagery, the color of food has never been more critical. Think about everything that's rainbow colored, and this is where it kind of started. Artificial colors, making everything rainbow. And we're now starting to move into more natural ways of making food more colorful. Purple potatoes, looking at matcha ice cream, charcoal Swiss rolls. They look incredible. It's a beautiful way of looking at food. But does it always add up to a pleasurable eating experience? Last year, we were in Chicago, and our community told us that we had to go to a place called the Snow Dragon Shavery, who are a cafe full of desserts that are designed to be Instagrammed. This is me holding one of their macaron ice creams. It looks brilliant. It's the kind of thing that you want to put on your Instagram and say, look what I found. But how does it taste?
Filled macarons.
Oh, there's so many flavours and it's so cold.
That's the kind of reaction that you get. It's not exactly what you're looking for from food. The balance of flavors isn't there. There's far too much ice cream in that. It's not something that satisfies from a food perspective, but it does a really great job from a social media perspective. But rather than just sustenance, these foods are offering something different. They're offering the opportunity to be the first person in your community to share them. It's showcasing that you're on trend. It's your social currency. And its validation. Now, looking good is one thing, but millennials are also beginning to revert back to the need for physical things, experiences and memories that they can then share back on social media. Live activations, supper clubs, experiential events, they all help to elevate a food product or a recipe into something beyond the food itself, into an experience that can live afterwards online through videos and images. And this is what Desserts in Duvets was for us. It's a recipe book that we created. We funded it through Kickstarter, through our community. And as well as just a recipe book, it was full of the most indulgent desserts that you can imagine eating. And we wanted to have people picture a way of eating it that was snuggled up under a dessert. Snuggled up underneath a duvet in one of the most intimate settings. And the top perk for this Kickstarter was the chance to attend a supper club at our studio in East London, where we would serve up a 5-course menu of the desserts from the book, each paired with a savoury cocktail, so it wasn't too sweet. And then everyone would sit on beanbags underneath blankets, and we'd watch a film together. And this was our top perk on the Kickstarter, and it sold out within hours. It was the first thing to sell out. And people flew in from halfway around the world to be there. There was a couple from Sweden, there was a couple from Germany, a couple from Boston and Philadelphia. It was amazing. And the images and videos posted by the community afterwards and shared by their friends created this air of FOMO, fear of missing out. And it created demand for more books and for more events along the same line. And if your brands can create these physical interactions or events that millennials desire, then you can begin to drive connections with an audience that are hugely valuable, both online and in real life. Now, sitting at the center of this global food conversation is incredible. But it also means that we have the opportunity to influence people, and therefore we feel like we have to be careful. After all, if the only way that we see success or validity is through the amount of clicks or likes that we get, we're going to run into a big problem. From Sorted's point of view, we know that our vanity numbers, such as reach, likes, and clicks, would be much higher if we concentrated on propagating the novelty food trends that we see. In fact, over the last 10 years, we've seen a large number of media companies set up to do exactly that. They're the people that propagate hybrid foods, so pizza, donuts, and sushi lasagnas, and that sort of thing. They create this complete and utter air of food porn, which is fantastic, and it definitely fulfills a want. But what is it actually doing to us as a society? With obesity and diabetes on the rise, food sustainability becoming a bigger conversation, should we be pushing these food novelty trends down people's throats? That's a bad analogy. As a society, we feel like we have a responsibility to use our platform and our conversations for good, which is why we work hard to find a balance between the novelty and the meaningful. Sometimes we do this in a way we upload videos which we know won't perform as well as another one would. But we want to raise issues. We want to talk to people about what's really happening. And if we can do that in a way that is fun and entertaining and it gets people talking or thinking about things, then surely everybody wins. We've already mentioned it a couple of times today, but we know that veganism is massively on the rise. There's a lot of reasons that people choose vegan diets, and so we want to talk to our community about it, find out what they're thinking, find out why it's of interest to them. We tasted the world's first bleeding vegan burger, and we're talking to the community about why it existed. And from their point of view, they were thinking, well, why would somebody who's vegan want to eat something that reminds them so much of eating meat? And it was only when we were able to explain to them, well, no, this is meant for meat eaters to cut down on their meat consumption, that it started to click. We've gone through and found ways to make dishes that we all know and love and make them vegan by using special techniques or different ingredients. We even created a series of videos where we went out and explored vegan food around London and gave our own personal thoughts and opinions. And actually that series of videos got me, a devout steak and cheese guy, to give Veganuary a go back at the beginning of the year. And I really enjoyed it. And although I haven't stuck to a vegan diet full time since then, my meat and dairy consumption has definitely reduced a lot compared to this time last year. And when our community find out about that, they're amazed because they know me as the steak and cheese guy, and it starts to get them questioning their own choices and say, well, if Jamie can do that, I could probably give that a go. So we know that we can use the power of social media to start the right types of conversations and even inflict change. But we have to move past the lowest common denominator. We have to look past the vanity part of social media and use it for the right reasons. And that's where we see things heading in the future. Because all of us in this room sit at the center of the food trends world. Some of us want to create the next food trend. Some of us want to report back on the next food trend and share it with a global audience. And some of us want to capitalize on them and share them with a wider customer base. In one way or another, we all have a platform and a responsibility to make sure that we're not only giving people what they want, but also what they should be having. It's fair to say that social media hasn't just sped up the food trend life cycle, but it's changed the landscape of food trends altogether. With just one tweet from somebody like Kim Kardashian, we could all want to be drinking lattes out of an ice cream cone. But do we really want that, or is that just something that is a novelty? The truth is, social media has made us more tribe-led than ever before. I mentioned at the beginning of my talk that the millennial is an incredibly lazy way of segmenting people, and I truly believe that. Our influences are far more fragmented than ever before. We don't all watch the same 4 TV channels like we used to. We follow people, groups, brands, hashtags, things that we can identify with, and they all have the power to influence our choices. But we all have a responsibility to ensure that the trends that we help create are done for the right reasons and not just short-term validation. Thank you very much.